Hello everybody, it is Mariah, otherwise known as Blue Moonstone, and today we are back with another Mining Mysteries video. For this video, I have some short ghost stories, and I will get right on into it since I made you wait an entire week. The stories prepared for Mining Mysteries may be disturbing for some viewers. Some stories may have graphic details that are not suitable for everyone. Viewers' discretion is advised. These stories are found on Reddit, so the legitimacy of them is unknown. It is up to you to decide whether or not you believe. A true ghost story that fucked with my childhood. When I was 5, me, my 1-year-old brother, my mom, and my dad moved out of Atlanta to a suburb just northeast of the city. The house was your run-of-the-mill, shoddily made pult home. It was 2 stories tall that had crappy siding made out of that material that rots really easily. I don't know what it's called, but it wasn't wood. And it was affordable for us as a middle-class family. Anyways, the first 2 weeks there I had to sleep on the floor with nothing more than a blanket and a pillow until the 3rd week when my mom had finally bought me a bunk bed. It was the first night on this bunk bed that I found myself randomly awakening around 12 a.m. for no particular reason. Light was shining under the door and someone was in the hall. Immediately after this, I looked up across my barren room to see a tall, shadowy figure standing in the middle of the floor. Immediately, my heart froze. Being deadly afraid of whatever it was, I turned around, put the blanket over my head, and I attempted to muster the courage to yell for about an hour. Finally, I began hollering at the top of my lungs for one of my parents. Suddenly, my dad busts in and sees me. I was utterly relieved. What he said next was something I did not need to hear. "Did you see it too?" I sat there silently for a moment. "No," I lied. He slept on the top bunk, and startled, we both went back to sleep. During my 10 years in that house, we saw multiple things, and the worst one came some years later when I was sleeping on the couch beneath our balcony that looked over the den in the living room. I saw 2 bright white heads, like children, staring down at me. I nearly crapped my pants. The last thing I remember seeing was a tall, slender shadow that moved along the wall and disappeared. I went to school and bought dozens of ghost books, and I studied them as much as possible. I then read somewhere that cats kept spirits away, so I got 2 cats with my mom's permission, and sure as shit, that actually worked. The last real thing that happened, as I remember, was someone whispering my name as I walked by the room where I had seen the first figure, and one of the cats walking out of that door purring as if someone had been playing with it, followed by the door, which was hollow and made from balsa wood, thus it was physically impossible to slam. It slammed violently, and the cat didn't budge. Luckily, the entire family was there to see that. The worst part was it wasn't until we moved that my mom admitted to seeing those things too. She even named some of them that I hadn't had the courage to tell her about, but she never talked about it so she didn't scare my brother. She was even more startled when she got the place tested for carbon monoxide and came up short. I talked to a friend years later and he said that it might have something to do with low wave frequencies and air pockets. I chalked it up to believe this, and to this day, I no longer believe in that stuff. There's no denying what we all saw and how creepy it was, and I still have extremely vivid dreams about that place to this day, and the dark, shadowy figure standing in the doorways, just staring at me in silence. My personal ghost story. Well, I guess to begin this, I will state that the following story did actually happen to me. I refrained from telling this story due to the ridicule and the wisecracks about my apparent love for fake stories. To believe me or not falls on the reader. This story took place at one of my close friend's houses. His house is placed at the end of a lane off to the side, on the outside of the house. Does not look out of the ordinary, nothing creepy or ominous about it. I met this friend of mine, I'll call him Mike, through another friend during a camping trip, and immediately we clicked as friends and began to hang out more and more often. My other friends had always told me ghost stories about how haunted his house was, and how a night in that house could be downright terrible if you got it on the right night. I merely laughed along, and I explained it away as them just trying to scare me. I never realized how wrong I could have been. Most of their stories dealt with unexplained random footsteps and noises, maybe some shadows around the house. None of those stories particularly scared me, but the story begins when he asked me for the first time to stay in his house. This, however, is not the main story, but this is just where it began. I showed up as he met me very happy that I decided to accept his invitation, and he quickly gave me the tour of his house. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary to me. I didn't find anything strange, and I felt quite at home in the house. The activity began when he went to take a shower. I was alone in his room with the door shut, playing Xbox, when I heard a gentle knock at the door. It was nothing extremely scary. His parents respected his privacy and knocked before entering. I, still playing Xbox, answered with a "come in," but I received no response. It happened a second time, and again this time I said "come in." I paused the game. I was puzzled as to what I was hearing, but no answer again. So I continued playing, and no more than a minute later, something slams, not knocks, slams on the door. My head spun around in time to watch the door shake from the force. I froze in my seat. It happened again this time. My eyes never left the door, and I ran to the door yelling at Mike for messing with me. I yanked it open just to stare at the open air. Nothing was there. No explanation and no clue as to what just happened. After this happened, I was tentative about staying, but I did spend many nights in that house with no further problems until one more night. I went over, never expecting anything to be out of place. He met me in his garage, just like he always did, and we proceeded to head inside. But the feeling I got when I walked through the door was unexplainable, and I wish I would have walked away after that. At first, it was nothing, just an awful feeling. We played Xbox, rode skateboards, and just hung out. Nothing happened. No noise, no nothing. The sun went down and we headed inside for the night. We put a movie on and we both began to drift off to sleep. I was woken up at about 4 in the morning and I heard footsteps upstairs. At first, I explained it as his dad getting up for work, but his dad had to leave by 3:30 and it did not make sense, but it only got worse from here. Things started to smash around and it sounded like there was at least 8 people or more upstairs running around, slamming things, opening cabinets, throwing things around. I sat up frozen in fear, sweating profusely and on the verge of tears. I laid down, I shut my eyes, and I prayed that this would be over soon. It all stopped at once, almost as if on cue, and I sat up and I listened, and I heard slow, heavy footsteps walk the whole way down the hallway, stopping for a minute at the top of the steps. It proceeded to walk down the steps. I stared at the landing in fear of what I might see. The footsteps hit the landing, but to my surprise and horror, I saw nothing where those footsteps had been. I ducked beneath the covers and I laid completely still until it had passed me, moving towards the door. I peeked out over the covers just in time to witness the door swing wide open very quickly and then slam shut. After this, it sounded as if someone was pushing on the glass door from the outside. It didn't move for somewhere around 15 to 20 minutes, and again the footsteps started. I needed to leave that house. I ran to the steps and walked very slowly up them. I hit the landing and everything went quiet and still. The only movement that I saw was the kitchen fan still rotating very slowly but continuous. I ran back down the hall, reaching my friend's bedroom. I ran through the door, slamming it behind me. I grabbed my bag of clothes and my shoes, and I braced myself to open the door. I opened it to a completely quiet house, and the worst part about looking down the hallway was seeing the shadow from the fan still spinning. I made a dash for the basement door. Upon reaching it, I yanked hard, but it did not budge. It was locked. I had not locked it, and I had just watched it swing open on its own 20 minutes earlier. I unlocked it and I ran to the street. I sprinted about 2 houses down and looked back at the house to see that the light in my friend's room was off, and the light in the kitchen was also off. I had not done that due to the speed that I left this house. My parents came to get me at 5 in the morning, and I spent the next 3 days sleeping in short naps. I eventually moved on from this experience, and I have spent many nights in the house since then. Not one night has ever been that bad since. My short ghost story. Hey everyone, this is just a short story about one experience with the supernatural that happened to me while living in Savannah, Georgia. I just moved to Savannah right out of college to start working at a newspaper company I had gotten an offer from. A friend of mine was a realtor in the area and had found a small cheap house a few blocks from my office. A deal I couldn't refuse. The house was pretty old, but the previous owner had done some updating and remodeling. Apparently the owner's time in Savannah hadn't worked out in his or her favor, and they had moved back to the city. My friend helped me move in as I began evaluating the house. The first thing that I noticed was how incredibly cold it was. It was in the middle of May in South Georgia. It was quite odd for an old house like this to be as cold as it was. I checked the thermostat and it read 72. It must be busted, I thought. We really need to get that fixed. I don't want a huge utility bill, I mentioned to the realtor. The first night passed almost without issue. I was upstairs in my room reading a brochure I had picked up about a small town when I heard a bunch of loud banging downstairs. I wasn't fully unpacked yet, so I attributed the noises to some of my unpacked items falling over. I went down to find no less than 6 cats in my living room making a mess of things. How in the world they got in my house, I had no clue. I was certain there was nowhere they could have hidden. Upon Upon my initial inspection of the place, and they looked so emaciated and tired, I gave them some scraps of my ramen noodles and some water. I decided to let them stay the night so that I could find a place for them to go in the morning, but I was never given a chance. The next morning, I woke up to a very weird feeling, almost like a new sense to my persona was picking something up. Similar to the feeling you get when you feel that someone is watching you, I went downstairs and what I saw in the living room made me shriek and my knees buckled from underneath. All of the cats' bodies were strewn across the living room. Each one was gutted from the midsection to the neck. I ran back to my room and I slammed the door. I locked it and I immediately called the authorities. When I called them and I explained the situation and my location, the officer on the phone almost sounded like he was expecting my call. He wasn't shocked by my account of what had happened at all. "We'll be there shortly, ma'am," he assured me. 2 officers arrived. Each had a sort of wincing facial expression as they slowly and reluctantly entered my home. Hands on their sidearms, ready to be drawn at any second. They took pictures, dusted for fingerprints, and interviewed a couple of my neighbors, one of which I witnessed their face go pale white as the officer assumably explained to them what happened. "We will contact you if we learn anything new. For now, I would change the locks and look into getting a security system," said one of the officers. I did exactly that, as well as purchasing a shotgun, and I never heard from the officers again. A couple weeks passed by without any incident. The only thing out of the ordinary was the feeling I had, which I mentioned earlier. It never fully went away while I was at home. Also, occasionally I would think that I saw something move out of the corner of my eye several times, but nothing would be there when I looked. I had been working late hours, so I figured it was just from exhaustion and trauma from witnessing such a gruesome scene in my own home. I had fully unpacked now, and I was placing some family pictures around the house. I was upstairs hanging pictures when my motion sensor alarm went off downstairs. I hesitated with horror and realized I left my phone downstairs. The sound of the alarm mimicked my own internal alarm. Hastily, I picked up my shotgun, flicked on the lights, and aimed it down the staircase. It didn't seem that anyone was there. I slowly made my way down and shut the alarm off. Everything seemed to be in place. I did a quick sweep of my small living area before heading back upstairs, when something had caught my eye. Every picture I'd placed downstairs had been moved, angled towards the front door. Upon further inspection, I noticed that every picture I was in, my face was circled in what looked like blood. Before I could react to this horrifying discovery, several loud crashes came from downstairs. Wanting to get whatever this was out of my house, I ran back upstairs and I whipped my shotgun around. Every picture I had hung upstairs was smashed in, broken glass was everywhere, and I was fully aware I had something supernatural haunting my house. I knew I had to get out of this place, but being new to town, I realized I had nowhere else to go. Realizing I forgot to retrieve my phone while I was downstairs, but I was too afraid to go back down, I decided to just stick it out for the rest of the night. Locked away in my room. I think I may have gotten 20 minutes of sleep that night, and when the sun came up, I reluctantly crept downstairs to retrieve my phone. Right as I reached for it, I saw a shadow pass behind me through the reflection in the window. I turned, but nothing was there, and footsteps could be heard racing up the staircase. On the verge of tears, I knelt down to my couch and I began dialing my friend's number, but he didn't answer. And suddenly I noticed that the house got unusually quiet and still, and then I heard the footsteps slowly thudding towards me, getting closer and closer until nothing. An icy terror tingled my spine up to my neck when I heard the whisper in my ear coming from behind me. A woman's voice said,
"You should not be here. They're coming for you, and they'll never let you go. Be gone from here."
I did not hesitate for a second, jumping up like a loaded spring and bolting out the door into the street screaming, in my pajamas, shotgun still in my hand. I called the authorities who arrived and had stated, "Yeah, something is in that house," very matter-of-factly. I left all my things in that house, paid a moving company to move them from the house to my hotel room, in which I stayed in until I found a new place. Before this event, I wasn't a big believer in the supernatural, but there was something about witnessing an event like that with your own 2 eyes. The realization that paranormal does in fact exist, it changes you forever. You always think that ghosts are creepy ghouls that haunt you in the night, but having my first-hand encounter with one during broad daylight made it that much more traumatizing for me. Realizing that they are real and that they can affect you at any time of any day was very horrific. You feel a sense of safety when it's light out, but it's a false sense. Experiencing the ghost in pure daylight was probably the scariest part of it all, an unexplained notion. Well, that's my story. For all of you who question the existence of ghosts or spirits, I can attest firsthand that they do in fact exist. So next time you hear a bump in the night, or in the day, it might just be exactly what you thought it was. A short story from a relatively unknown area. After reading through many posts after my first visit here in the past hour, I feel obligated to share a quick story my uncle shared with me a few years back. A little background. My mom is from a country known as the Solomon Islands. It's, in my opinion, Earth's best kept secret. As any time I tell anyone what my background is biracial, they seem confused or assume I meant Samoan. She has told me countless stories about her country, mostly relating to black magic, guardians, and devils, but the story that keeps me up is a story that both she and my uncle told me while I was staying with my family on an island called Canelo. Canelo has an enormous mountain absolutely filled with forestry. While walking on the man-made path around the mountain, you can barely see 5 feet in. I'll try to tell the story as best as I can remember from my uncle's point of view. When I was a young man in my 20s, I was not a good person. I practiced black magic and I thought that I was invincible. Being the youngest brother, I always thought I had a point to prove. There's a legend on this island known as the Crying Woman. They say that when you hear her crying faintly, she's very close to you, right up against your door or your window, waiting for you to leave your home and look for her, in order to get you lost in the mountain's forestry. When her cries are loud and it sounds like she's right outside of your home, she is far away waiting for you up the mountain. Being a young adult, I was curious, and I heard her cries one evening when it was pouring rain. It was faint, but I could definitely make it out. I checked the windows and the doors, and I didn't see anything, so I went outside of the house. My body froze. The way he explained it sounded like a mixture of vertigo and paralysis. All I could see was a glowing white figure waiting for me by the forest's edge. From what I remember, she was beautiful, but it felt menacing, yet for some reason I couldn't help myself and I continued on. I don't remember how long I hiked up the mountain after her, but what felt like an hour or two in, I started hearing branches being viciously chopped down. I had no idea what was going on and I was scared. It was as if machetes were cutting everything in their way to get to me. It stopped right before me, and what I can only describe as 2 phantoms were standing before me holding large machetes. I felt a strong head rush almost instantly, and I almost collapsed from what felt like dehydration, and I kind of came to my senses. The 2 figures disappeared and cut down a path for me to the bottom of the mountain, where I found my way home. I made it back home and the day was bright. I remember seeing your aunt and she ran to me crying. Apparently I'd been on the mountain for over 36 hours. A few nights after I was told this story, I experienced the Crying Woman. Our house was so small, so my younger brother and I shared a small room. We all had tiny windows and large shutters covered most of the living area. One night when it was deathly quiet, I heard the faint cry and I froze in fright. I didn't want to open my eyes. But as most people would do, I opened them and I peeked over my brother's head at our window. All I remember seeing was what looked like an indigenous old woman with a hood on. I quickly closed my eyes and I shoved my face into the pillow. But it continued through the night. My whole body shivered. I felt like I couldn't talk and I had trouble breathing, which I assumed was because of the shock. A few nights later, my older brother's girlfriend had a similar experience. Our family was playing cards in the living area and my brother's girlfriend had gone to bed, but their room wasn't more than 10 feet from the table we sat at. At one point my brother jumped up and said something doesn't feel right. He went straight to his room to find his girlfriend motionless and unable to move or talk. All of my aunts and my mom slept in a protection circle around her that night. She said she heard the cries as well, but then something else kicked it. She explained it as if 100 hands came underneath her and held her down. She tried to call for help for hours, but her mouth felt covered and she couldn't speak. I have more stories, but I would have to talk to my mom to get the full details. Sorry if my formatting is bad. This is my first post here. Alright everybody, that is going to be it for me today. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to like and subscribe. There are new mining mysteries every Monday, so make sure you don't miss a brand new video every week. I cannot wait to see you in the next one. Goodbye!